Good evening to you from Telesur Studios here in Caracas, Venezuela. My name is Regan Devines. A look at this evening's headlines. 6 months until peace, the Colombian president and the leader of the FARC come together to announce a breakthrough in the peace talks. Ministers from Colombia and Venezuela make progress in talks to bring peace to their border. And tackling climate change cannot wait. Pope Francis speaks out at the White House on his first day of his visit to the U.S. All these stories and more now on From the South. Thank you for being here with us on From the South. It was a moment millions had been waiting for, but many feared would never come. A face-to-face meeting between Colombia's president and the head of the FARC guerrillas to announce a breakthrough on the most difficult issue in the Colombian peace process: justice for the victims of 50 years of armed conflict. After separate meetings with the Cuban president, Raul Castro, Juan Manuel Santos and Timoleon Timochenko Jimenez appeared together to make the announcement. The representatives of Norway, Cuba, Chile and Venezuela, the four countries serving as guarantors and accompanying the peace process, were there as well, in addition to agreeing to a judicial process to deal with crimes committed by both sides. The government and the FARC set a deadline of 6 months to reach a final peace agreement.
We have agreed, as you have just heard, to create a special judicial body for peace, which will ensure that the crimes committed during the conflict, especially the most serious ones, will not remain in impunity. This will include a court and a judicial body to investigate, judge, and impose sanctions for these crimes.
The top leader of the FARC, Timoleon Jimenez, also known as Timochenko, also expressed his satisfaction with the agreement. Timochenko assumed command of the FARC back in 2011 after two previous leaders, Alfonso Cano and Jorge Briceño, were killed in Colombian government airstrikes.
On the part of the delegation of the FARC, allow me to express our great satisfaction at the successful conclusion of the agreement on the special judicial body for peace between the Colombian government and the FARC-EP. This will create excellent conditions for us to advance on all the other points on the peace talks agenda. We are pleased to confirm that this peace body will deal with all those involved in the conflict, both competence and non-competence, and not for one side only. This is restorative justice.
Speaking from Havana, just before the agreement was announced, the Venezuelan representative Roy Chatterton expressed his country's hopes.
What the Bolivarian government, President Maduro, Foreign Minister Delcy Rodriguez, and all our team are hoping for is what we have been working for the last 3 years, and that is quite simply a peace agreement.
And we've got our correspondent Natalia Margarita joining us now live from Bogota, where social movements are celebrating the breakthrough in Havana. Hi Natalia, what's the mood there like? What have been the reactions there in Colombia?
Hi there, Regan. The mood is incredible. I can't really describe it in words. I can really put it into words. Emotions are running incredibly high. I'm talking to you live now from the place in Bogota where different social movements, political leaders gathered to await for this important and significant latest agreement by the FARC and the government. They have been referring to this day as a historic day, not just for the peace process, but for Colombia as a country. Many of those leaders have been victims of the armed conflict themselves, victims of political violence, and you could see tears in their eyes out of happiness, of emotion, and of the very, very high hope that they are having now. To put a little bit into context why people are so excited and emotional here in Colombia, I have to say that this was one of the most challenging points to agree. During the first year of the peace negotiations, the FARC and the government managed, in fact, to agree on 3 points that are land reform, political participation, and agreements on to stop the trade of illegal drugs. But then came this point of justice and victims, and It came as a huge challenge that even took them more than 1 year to finally reach an agreement on that. So today, when this agreement was announced from Havana, also by President Santos himself, together with the maximum leader of the FARC, so they see this as a definitive moment for the peace process. They say that there is no way back for this peace process, that we're actually very close to have a final peace accord. And in fact, it was announced by President Santos from Havana, it was announced from Havana by the peace delegations that over the course of maximum the next 6 months, we're going to finally see this final peace agreement reached, Regan.
Natalia, quickly before you leave, you and I spoke a bit on this earlier today, the point on justice for the victims, which has been described as the most challenging issue in the whole peace process. Can you yet explain exactly what it involves?
It involves on the first place, to have the victims in the center of the transitional justice system that had been agreed. And then to have the victims at the center, it implies compensation, full compensation for the victims. That implies guarantees of non-repetition, but also truth. There is also something very interesting that many victims of state crimes have been demanding for decades here in Colombia, and it has to do that not just the insurgency must commit to the truth and face justice, but also state agents that have been involved in crimes in the wake of this more than 5 decades armed conflict should also face justice, Regan. And this was explicit in the agreement that we got to know today, Regan. So to sum it up, it implies compensation for the victims, truth, and guarantees of non-repetition. That's what we're talking about here in general terms, Regan.
Thanks so much for the update, Margarita. We'll touch base with you another time.
Back to you, Regan.
Moving on, in other Colombian news, this Wednesday, a delegation of the Santos government arrived in Venezuela to continue conversations regarding the border situation faced by the two countries. The Colombian delegation was headed by Foreign Minister Maria Angela Holguin, who was received by her counterpart Delcy Rodriguez. The meeting is part of a wider diplomatic effort to ease tensions between the neighboring countries that have resulted from rampant criminal activity in the border region. Both nations are looking to solidify a peace agreement that will help eradicate contraband and paramilitary activity on the border. The Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is on a visit to several Caribbean countries to boost relations. His first stop was Kitts and Nevis, which is celebrating the 32nd anniversary of its independence. Later, Maduro traveled on to Dominica.
This is a visit of friendship, and is a visit to take on new commitments for cooperation after the difficult situation left by Hurricane Erika. But we also want to talk about the future and our shared economic, commercial, and social development.
2 new reports on the disappearance of the 43 students in Ayotzinapa suggest a possible cover-up by Mexican authorities who have been accused of working with organized crime. The online Mexican publication Sin Embargo published an interview with a survivor of the attack who claims he informed authorities about a 5th bus present at the scene. The witness said that he took authorities to the site where the federal police forced the students off the same bus at gunpoint. According to the Spanish newspaper El País, there is evidence that the armed forces were fully aware of the activities of the students and were kept abreast of the series of events that led to their disappearance. This Saturday will mark the 1-year anniversary of the students' abductions. Mexico City has one of the largest video surveillance systems in the world. With more than 11,000 cameras, the city's authorities say crime has dropped dramatically. Many are questioning, however, whether this advanced system is truly designed to secure justice. Clayton Khan has more.
In 2009, Heriberto Garduño, a chauffeur, received the news that his older sister had been kidnapped and killed in the Mexican capital. He expected the authorities to use their technological resources to catch those responsible.
La secuestraron y la golpearon y la mataron.
They kidnapped her, beat her, and killed her. I went to the authorities where they were going to supposedly show me the surveillance footage. They are technologically very advanced, and I thought the truth would come out. So I went with hope that they would show me who actually killed my sister.
¿Quién había sido quien se había llevado a mi hermana?
In fact, he was denied access to the surveillance cameras from the scene, and a local judge ruled that his sister had died of natural causes.
No han favorecido la tecnología.
Fighting crime on behalf of the Public Security Ministry and the Attorney General's office is a very strategic task. It improves our work, and with the analysis we do afterwards, the cameras give us a lot of intelligence.
Les convenga a ellos.
Mexico City prides itself on being a model for crime reduction. The authorities claim its system of 11,000 closed-circuit cameras installed in 2009 and known as C4 has cut serious crime by 32%.
Es un trabajo muy estratégico para atender los delitos por parte de la Secretaría de Seguridad.
This technology is not implemented in favor of working people like me. It is only for those who are politicians or for different agencies. For them, it works.
Nos da la información de las cámaras a posteriori.
While watchdog groups have criticized the authorities' unreliability in collecting crime data, human rights lawyers denounce what they say is the mismanagement of the surveillance system in high-profile cases, like the torture and killing of a photographer and 4 others early last month. They say the cameras can be used to create parallel narratives.
On one hand, the Mexico City Attorney General's office issues very succinct press releases. However, on the other hand, it leaks relevant information about the case to specific media outlets.
Whether in these high-profile cases or in one of the more than 90 everyday crimes in the Mexican capital, families of the victims and rights defenders agree. Video surveillance systems are effective only when there is a genuine will to use them to achieve justice. Clayton Cantelesur, Mexico City.
In a similar vein, the president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, has said that violent crime has decreased by almost 25% in the last 2 years. But as our correspondent Gerardo Torres reports, women's organizations believe these numbers are a bit off.
The government in Honduras insists that crime figures are down by 22% and that the country currently has only 56 murders per 100,000 inhabitants instead of 78. But researchers say that facts point to something different.
Esto definitivamente no concuerda con la realidad nacional. Nosotros vemos
This doesn't match up with the reality that we see. For example, the number of women murdered has increased, according to women's organizations, by more than 200% in comparison to last year. This means that if last year 800 women were murdered, so far this year more than 1,000 have been killed. And there are other sectors that have also increased, like the murder of minors.
Hay más de 1,000 casos de mujeres que han sido muertas por su condición de mujer. Podemos referirnos a otros casos también, como la muerte de menores.
Women's organizations have shown that official reports have been concealing information in an attempt to change how people see the situation.
Hemos visto algunos esfuerzos, por ejemplo, de algunas organizaciones de mujeres.
We have seen some efforts by women's organizations that have been doing their own investigations, collecting information on murders. And they show that many of the victims don't appear in official reports but do appear in the national newspapers every day. This was a study done for the Center for Women's Rights, and it indicates that we need to analyze again the way the state provides data on murders and other crimes.
Creo que nos está dejando una pista bien clara de que se debe de hacer una revisión en los sistemas de información para temas de homicidio y otra incidencia criminal del país.
The government repeats its claims over and over again with the help of the mass media, but the Honduran population experienced something very different on a daily basis. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
Bolivia will hold a referendum next February to decide whether President Evo Morales will be allowed to run for a 4th consecutive term. The Legislative Assembly passed a bill last week, supported by social movements, which aims at amending the nation's constitution. The bill now needs to be approved via referendum to take effect. If the outcome of the referendum affirms Morales' bid, the bill will be sent again to the National Assembly for final approval. The initiative comes as President Morales' approval rating tops 60%. In Argentina, the city government of Buenos Aires, led by businessman Mauricio Macri, is coming under fire amid a growing corruption scandal. Our correspondent Laureano Ponce with the details.
After 2 nominees for Congress in his right-wing party PRO have been accused of corruption, the Buenos Aires mayor and presidential hopeful Mauricio Macri is under the spotlight. Several Buenos Aires city legislators from different opposition parties demanded the political responsibilities need to be clarified, as both accusations involve high-level officials in the local government.
What we see here, and what people start to see, is that the truth behind the PRO party and its speeches on transparency and a new way of doing politics has been exposed. We can see they do exactly what they criticize. They use political methods that we left behind long ago.
One of the accusations was directed against Eduardo Amadeo, a parliament hopeful in the right-wing coalition Cambiemos. Amadeo is the head of two NGOs, which were awarded with more than $400,000 in contracts by the Buenos Aires local government since 2008. Such contracts were not properly registered in the city's official bulletin.
There are a series of problems to be addressed in this legislature, and one of them is how they have diverted funds from the public sector to the private sector. This is a corruption scandal that is now hitting the city government, but which is also part of the way the Pro Party behaves in Buenos Aires, and the political head of all this is Mauricio Macri.
A previous case involves the city government for irregularly awarding more than $2 million to a TV production company owned by the now former nominee for Congress in Macri's ballot, Fernando Niembro, who declined his candidacy amid a growing scandal. While in recent days, local legislators tried to pass a bill demanding Mayor Macri to provide detailed explanations about the so-called Niembro affair, lawmakers aligned with Macri blocked the initiative.
One of the main slogans of this coalition led by Macri was transparency and the fight against corruption. Now it turns out that they are deeply involved in just such a scandal, yet they don't want to give proper explanations.
Niembro's resignation was the first result of the growing corruption scandal in Macri's party. However, the main problem he seems to face right now is the increasingly visible distance between his discourse and the reality. Laureano Ponce, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
Still to come on from the South, the Pope may be wing worshippers in the United States, but not everyone is happy with his choice of saints. We'll explain why after the break.
Caracas, Havana, Mexico, Quito, Washington. Wherever the newsmakers will be there. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. A world infinitely connected. Millions of people instantaneously interacting. Experiences relayed in 144 characters. Millions of lives in every corner of the planet. They're not tweets, they're stories. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
From London, an interpretation of current world politics as presented by the activist, writer and historian Tariq Ali.
The emergence of the United States as a global empire.
The world today, only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Welcome back. As part of his visit to the United States, Pope Francis conducted a Mass in Washington, D.C. earlier this Wednesday. The Mass was held at the National Sanctuary of the Immaculate Conception in the nation's capital. During his homily, Pope Francis called on people to take responsibility for each other and for the world as a whole. He urged his followers to put complacency aside and to practice greater solidarity with each other. During a meeting with Catholic bishops earlier in the day, Francis also spoke out on the crimes of sexual abuse committed by members of the clergy.
I realize how much the pain of recent years has weighed upon you, and I have supported your generous commitment to bring healing to victims, in the knowledge that in healing we are too healed, and to work to ensure that such crimes will never be repeated.
The Pope began his day in the United States with a visit to the White House, where he was welcomed by President Barack Obama. The pontiff, who has often criticized the damage caused to the poor and to the environment by the excesses of capitalism, immediately raised the issue of climate change. Speaking to a crowd of 15,000 on the South Lawn, Francis urged the U.S. to tackle climate change and lauded Obama's efforts to reduce air pollution.
Mr. President, I find it encouraging that you are proposing an initiative for reducing air pollution. Accepting the urgency, it seems clear to me also that climate change is a problem we can no longer be left to a future generation. When it comes to the care of our common home, we are living at a critical moment of history.
During the ceremony, Obama thanked the Pope for his help in restoring diplomatic ties between the United States and Cuba. Francis had held prior secret talks in the Vatican with representatives of both nations.
Holy Father, we are grateful for your invaluable support of our new beginning with the Cuban people, which holds out the promise of better relations between our countries, greater cooperation across our hemisphere, and a better life for the Cuban people.
For more now on the Pope's visit to the United States, we're joined by our very own correspondent, Bianca Perez. Hi, Bianca. We're glad you're there in Washington, D.C., and it's an exciting day for many. On the street, what are people saying about the Pope's visit?
Thank you very much. And as you mentioned, yes, it was very exciting for people here on the street. Thousands lined up outside of the National Mall. This was where the Pope paraded down after his meeting with President Obama this morning. 30,000 to be exact were there since 4 in the morning. Some people slept outside, and their reactions were just joy, excitement. Some people were crying from the emotion that they had from, seeing the Pope, and a lot of them were just hopeful that he will carry their messages. Speaking with some of them on the streets, they mentioned, immigration reforms. They hope that he will keep all of the immigrants in mind. They also hope that he will speak on climate change. He is, after his meeting with President Obama, he will also be meeting tomorrow morning with a joint session of Congress, and they are hoping that he will address these issues as well as, an end to poverty, an end to racism and discrimination here in the United States. And people are just very overjoyed and just very hopeful that he will, carry this message over and be able to be a voice for the people here in the United States.
Understandably so, Bianca. What do you think are some of the highlights of Pope Francis' visit there thus far? What's been his message?
Well, thus far, as you previously mentioned, he spoke about the crimes of, the violations of children by some of the priests in the church, and that was a very big deal because it kind of brought more of a, the tone of what he will be speaking here, as well as, of course, his mention of immigrants early in the morning when he met with President Obama. He brought up the fact that he himself is the child of immigrants and he is very proud of it. And he kind of brought political topics out already in the agenda, very, very early on in the agenda. So those are some of the highlights. Of course, he will also be meeting with Congress, and his message has been, he will be speaking on climate change, he will be speaking on immigration, he will be speaking on racism, peace for the world, and he's kind of made it very clear throughout the whole day that these are the messages that he wanted to give. I also want to highlight that the Pope did stop his Pope-mobile when they were parading down the National Mall for a little girl who wanted to give him a letter. This little girl is from Guatemala, and she had a message for the Pope about immigration and her parents being immigrants, or her constant fear of her parents being deported. And so the Pope, of course, allowed her to come to him, and he stopped the Pope-mobile, he received the letter, he gave her a blessing, and the girl, of course, was allowed to deliver this letter herself. So that was a very kind gesture that the Pope made that really showed, his humility and the message that he has, which is he is a Pope of the people, and that's kind of what he has been trying to show here in the U.S. thus far.
I totally agree with that. He is a Pope of the people. Well, many conservatives have been trying to discredit Pope Francis for his stance on equality and the environment. Do you think these attempts have helped in any way to undercut the pontiff at all and his messages?
Well, I feel, speaking to the people today on the streets, everyone was kind of very in favor of his message, and they were, they wanted him to really be their voice. So I think it hasn't really had any type of impact at all, at least not with the masses, with the people that were supporting him in the streets. I feel that, 30,000 people showed up alone to the National Mall. Some people slept there, and this demonstrated that the people are with Pope Francis. They are very excited that he's here. And I think there's been no discredit at all from the conservative side, although they have tried. But I think it's been very minimal, if any at all.
Bianca, thanks so much. We know you've been out in the field all day. Try to get some rest. We'll touch base with you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Regan, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks so much. Moving on now. Today, the Pope also canonized Junipero Serra, who was an 18th century Spanish Franciscan friar. There is some controversy with this canonization, however, which is being protested by Native Americans in California who claim that Serra was brutal and forcibly evangelized Native people. Junipero Serra built a string of missionary churches along the Pacific coast with the aim of spreading the faith among the Native Americans. Many tribal leaders today say that he beat and imprisoned local people, suppressed their culture, and facilitated the spread of diseases. For the mission, Serra had human flaws and difficulties inherent to the time.
Our protest is also to tell the Pope that by canonizing Junipero Serra, they want to canonize colonialism, they want to canonize white supremacy, and they want to canonize the genocide of our people. And that is an immoral act.
Volkswagen's Chief Executive Officer, Martin Winterkorn, has submitted his resignation in the face of what is being called the biggest scandal in the car manufacturer's 78-year history. Germany's economy minister, Sigmar Gabriel, commended Winterkorn's decision to resign, even though the CEO is taking responsibility for something that happened before he took the helm at the company. And Volkswagen's shares continue to fall after it was accused of designing software for diesel cars that deceives regulators measuring toxic emissions. From Africa and the Middle East to Greece, then through Macedonia and Serbia, and now through Croatia. It's the new route taken by tens of thousands of refugees who, although blocked by Hungary's razor-wire fence, continue their journey to northern and western European countries. Croatian authorities now say that they are unable to cope with the numbers and have been assisting the refugees with train rides to the northern Croatian border. In spite of the war that has plagued Syria for 5 years, today Syrians are celebrating the eve of the first day of the Muslim religious festival, Eid al-Adha. Hazem Abdullah has more from the Syrian capital of Damascus.
Walking the streets of the ancient city of Damascus, one passes faces so full of determination for life that it's easy to forget that you are in a city that has suffered a half war. The shops, the people in the streets, everything and everyone is celebrating Eid al-Adha in spite of the circumstances.
We Syrians are fully aware of the hardships of this war, and we stand together shoulder to shoulder. Yes, we are suffering from the severe economic crisis due to the economic blockade and because of the terror that has struck Syria. All of this has led to increased prices, but you can see that the citizens have all they need, and we thank the Syrian government, which provides so much despite the war.
Like others, Muaz al-Hamwi had a hard time holding back the tears when asked about his hope for this holiday season. He could barely complete 2 words, wishing peace to prevail across the world. His son Uday agreed.
I hope that peace prevails in our country. We're tired of blood and grief. I hope that the Syrians can join together and bring love and peace to Syria. Unfortunately, some people do not want that. They only want destruction. I hope that all who have left and emigrated will come back home again, to rebuild what was destroyed by terrorism in order to rebuild Syria together.
Today, Syrians across the country are celebrating their defense and their unity in the face of militant attacks and an ongoing war that has already taken so many lives. Today, during the religious festival of Eid al-Adha, they are sending a united message to the whole world that they will stand hand in hand until they are victorious. Hazem Abdullah, Telisur, Syria.
Meanwhile, in Palestine, high prices and the lack of cash are dampening Eid celebrations for Muslims in the Gaza Strip. Our correspondent Noha Azil is there and filed this report.
As Muslims around the world are about to celebrate the Eid al-Adha holiday on Thursday, one of the two most important festivals in Islam, markets in Gaza were unusually close to empty. 8 years of tightened Israeli blockade on the coastal enclave, 3 Israeli offensives, the closure of crossings and the unpaid salaries have worsened the financial situation of Gazans. Despite markets being full of goods, residents are only allowed to buy their very essential needs, including new clothes for their children, chocolate and cookies. The complaints of citizens focus on the high prices in the light of the dead economic situation and the black market goods that make Eid celebrations unaffordable.
The situation is very tragic. We are blockaded. Our homes are demolished. We have martyrs, and there is no work. Vendors do not sell. People are only watching. There is no social welfare, no work. People here are very tired. We have sons and daughters. We hope we can enjoy the Eid. We are renting an apartment, but I cannot even afford 10 shekels to buy new clothes for my son or daughter.
In Eid al-Adha, Muslims are known to slaughter a sheep, a goat or a camel and offer to the poor. However, the current economic situation in Gaza has made it impossible for the middle class people to afford doing so. And apparently the act will be confined to the rich in the light of the increasing prices of meat in markets. Noharazin Telesu TV, Gaza.
The former president of the Venezuelan Football Federation, Rafael Esquivel, will be extradited to the United States for his role in the FIFA corruption scandal. Esquivel, who is also a member of the executive committee of the South American Football Confederation, was arrested in Switzerland last May along with 6 other officials of the world soccer body. He was accused of receiving millions in bribes for marketing rights to the Copa America for several years. Former FIFA Vice President Jeffrey Webb agreed to be extradited in July, and Swiss authorities also approved the extradition of Uruguayan citizen Eugenio Figueiredo. There is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and here in Caracas, Venezuela, I'm Riga Devines. We hope to see you again tomorrow. Have a great night.